All right, let's talk about a word you hear all the time in the tech world, Scrum. What is it really? How does it actually work? And why has it become so popular with so many development teams? We're going to break it all down. To really get why Scrum even exists, we have to start with the problem it was created to solve. And believe me, it's a huge one. For decades, a shocking number of software projects they failed. They didn't meet their goals. So the big question is, why?
Well, it boils down to a few key things. For one, systems are getting way more complex. Sometimes, teams just dive right into coding without a solid plan. But the absolute biggest challenge, the one that really changed the game, is change itself. Business needs are always in flux, and the old traditional ways of managing projects just couldn't keep up. They were too slow, too rigid.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the old plan-driven approach. Then, we'll look at the Agile philosophy that came along to shake things up. We'll zoom in on Scrum as a specific framework, take a peek inside its core cycle, the sprint, and finally, we'll talk about its strengths, its weaknesses, and where it really fits in the software world.
All right, first up, let's dive into that old-school, plan-driven way and its fundamental struggle with, you guessed it, change. The classic example of this is something called the waterfall model. And you should picture a literal waterfall. The water only flows one way, down. In the software world, this meant you had to finish one entire phase, like gathering every single requirement, before you could even think about starting the next phase, like designing the system. And right there, that's the massive problem. When you lock a project into these stiff, separate stages, it becomes incredibly difficult to handle change. I mean, imagine you're months into coding, and the customer suddenly realizes they need something different. With waterfall, trying to go back is a nightmare. It's expensive and it disrupts everything. This model really only works if you know every single requirement perfectly from day one, which, let's be honest, almost never happens in the real world.
So all this frustration with being so rigid, it basically sparked a revolution in thinking. This led to the rise of Agile, a totally new philosophy for building software.
And the difference between the two is just night and day. On the left, you've got that plan-driven world. Everything happens in separate, linear stages, all planned out way in advance. But on the right, you have Agile, where everything is woven together. You design a little, you build a little, you test a little, all in a constant loop. The product evolves through ongoing conversation and frequent deliveries, not from some giant, dusty master plan written months ago.
So if Agile is the philosophy, the big idea, how do you actually do it? How do you put it into practice? Well, that's where frameworks come in, and the most popular one, by a long shot, is Scrum.
The key thing to get about Scrum is that it's not a set of strict rules for how to code or design. Instead, it's a management framework. It's a way to organize really complex work into small, repeatable cycles. It's all about managing that iterative development process.
Now, to really understand Scrum, you've got to know the key players and pieces. Think of it like this. The product owner is the voice of the customer. They decide what gets built and what's most important. The development team is a small, self-organizing group that figures out how to build it. And the Scrum Master is like a coach. They make sure the team can follow the process and clears any obstacles out of their way. All the work that could possibly be done lives on a master to-do list called the product backlog. And the whole thing happens in these short focus cycles called sprints.
So that brings us to the engine of Scrum, the sprint. Let's pull back the curtain and see what actually happens inside one of these cycles.
So what's the whole point of a sprint? It's all about delivering something real and tangible. It's called a potentially shippable product increment. That's just a fancy way of saying that at the end of every 2 to 4 week cycle, the team has created a working, tested piece of the final product that could, in theory, be shipped to customers right then and there.
You see, every sprint follows this really clear, predictable rhythm. It kicks off with sprint planning, where the team grabs a chunk of the most important work off the top of the product backlog. Then they get to work in the development phase, building those features and checking in with each other every single day in a quick meeting called the Daily Scrum. At the very end, they hold a sprint review, which is basically a demo of the working software for stakeholders. And finally, they have a sprint retrospective, where the team just talks amongst themselves about what went well, what didn't, and how they can get better next time. And then, the whole cycle starts all over again.
It's a really powerful cycle, for sure. But Scrum isn't a silver bullet. It won't solve every problem. So it's super important to have a balanced view, to understand its strengths, its weaknesses, and where it truly fits. And look, when Scrum is firing on all cylinders, the benefits are just massive. Breaking a huge product down into small, manageable chunks makes everything less overwhelming. Since you're only planning for a few weeks at a time, changing requirements don't completely derail the project. Customers get to see working software super early and often, so they can give real valuable feedback. This whole process naturally improves communication and, maybe most importantly, builds genuine trust between the people building the software and the people paying for it.
But, and this is a big but, it's not perfect. There's some very real practical problems. That informal, flexible nature can clash with big organizations that need detailed, fixed-price legal contracts. It's also often a better fit for brand-new projects than it is for maintaining old existing systems. And here's a big one. Scrum was originally designed for small teams working in the same room. Making it work for huge, globally distributed teams can be a major challenge. Plus, it really demands a high level of skill and self-discipline from everyone involved.
So, what's the sweet spot for Scrum? When does it really click? It's most effective when you can realistically build and deliver the product piece by piece. It absolutely thrives with small, dedicated teams that can talk to each other easily. It's pretty much ideal for new product development, and, this is critical, it completely depends on having a customer representative, that product owner, who's available and empowered to give fast, decisive feedback.
All right, let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. What is Scrum's actual place in the whole landscape of software engineering? You know, this quote really nails the whole idea. At its heart, Agile, and therefore Scrum, is about cutting out the waste, things like excessive paperwork and pointless meetings, so you can be more nimble. The ultimate goal here is to build a team, a process, a whole organization that can respond to change quickly without having to tear everything down and start from scratch. It's about baking adaptability right into the DNA of how you work.
And that really leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? In a world where business and technology are changing faster than ever, maybe the real question for organizations isn't if they should be more agile and adaptive, but how they're going to make it work for them.